Hello everyone, my name is Reed and welcome to Storytime. Today we are going to be reading some malicious compliance stories, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. I wanted to be salaried. You wanted me to be hourly? Okay then. I applied to a full-time opening at a company, but for reasons they wanted to bring me in as a contractor for a while until a different position opened. I would be reporting to Joe in a department I didn't really care for, but it was alright as a temporary situation. Well, it turns out Joe was a reasonably nice person, but not such a great project manager. He staked his role at the company on our team delivering a certain major project on time. The problem was that a series of miscalculations meant we weren't able to even start working on it until halfway through the implementation phase. As schedule slipped and upper management expressed their disappointment, Joe became much less pleasant to be around. He yelled at good people for no reason, had a terrible attitude, and generally made life miserable for everyone in our workroom. Now, I was the sole contractor in that department full of salaried employees. Early on, Joe would all but push me out the door as my time card rolled over from 39.9 to 40.0 hours, as his budget had zero room for paying me for 41 hours a week. Even worse, that would pay the same as 41.5 hours because I was subject to time and a half overtime rules. As crunch time turned into a death march, Joe made announcements like, "No one's going home until this job is done," and scheduled to have breakfast and supper brought into the office every day. I asked Joe if this included me, and he said yes, of course, and he was surprised that I even had the nerve to ask. Okay then. It almost killed us. There was shouting and literally tears. We were all near a breaking point. Well, most of us. I was in a great mood. As rough and emotionally fraught as it was, we got the project done. We were heroes, and as Sunday dinner at our desk came and went, Joe thanked me in particular for my great attitude. OP, I really appreciate your hard work with a smile during this tough time. That's when I reminded him, hey, I clocked in extra 61 hours of overtime this week. I'm thrilled I could help. Joe dang near had a stroke, and I found myself standing outside waiting for my bus 2 minutes later. He was ticked, but couldn't really say anything because I had asked him if I had to stay, and he explicitly told me that I did. It worked out great for everyone in the long term. Blown budget or not, Joe looked good for getting the project done. The CEO liked my can-do attitude and transferred me into a full-time dream job. And that paycheck, getting paid Silicon Valley hourly rates for 131.5 hours, that's 40 plus 61 time and a half hours, bought a very nice vacation for my family. Thanks, Joe. I'm available to work all-nighters anytime you want to pay for them. Hey, OP, you're a good person. You worked them hard hours, you were happy about it. Sure, you got paid a crap ton of money for it, but you got the job done and did what you needed to do. That should be all that matters. You're going to throw your waste into my garden? Okay, great. My uncle's neighbors really hate him for literally no reason, and one day he walked into his garden to find 3 plastic bags, the heavy-duty ones you get dog food / cattle feed in, and they were lying on his lawn, and he knew immediately where they were from since he only has one neighbor, and the bags looked as if they had been lazily thrown over the shared fence. 2 of the bags were filled with leaf litter, and the other was full of apples that looked like they had been slightly eaten by worms. Obviously, the neighbors didn't want to eat them. My uncle, let's call him Flea, does all sorts of gardening in his spare time, and he thought that the neighbors threw them their waste for him to use, so he went around to their house and asked if they were the ones who threw them the leaf litter and the apples. They shut the door in his face without answering, and at this point, Flea realized they did it maliciously because they couldn't be bothered to take their waste anywhere. Most of you probably know that leaf litter is great for keeping soil healthy, and my uncle realizes this too, and decides to make compost from the leaves to use for his onions. He grows large onions for an annual competition, don't ask. After he has a bag full of his homemade leaf litter fertilizer, he waits until one of the neighbors leaves for work, then goes out into his front garden and makes a big deal of spreading the fertilizer in front of the neighbor, exaggerating every slight movement and noise. With the apples, however, he decided to make, in combination with his own apples, some sort of beer, wine, cider hybrid, and he also made sure that at least one of the neighbors saw him using their apples throughout the process. The drink was pretty good in the end, if not a bit strong. The icing on the cake for me, though, is when he neatly folded up the plastic bags and left them piled in the neighbor's garden with a rock on top of them in which he etched the word more. Huh. I knew Flea had awesome bass skills, but awesome farming skills as well. Wow, mad props. Get down immediately. About 14 years ago, when I was an 11-year-old kid, I liked to climb on stuff. The higher up, the better. And if my friends joined, even better. Hanging out on places where no one would find you is awesome. One day, during lunch break on school, me and my friends decided to climb on the school gym, a building of about 10 meters high. I was the first of the group to climb up to the top. Since it was a drain pipe, we went one by one. Since it was during break time, all the kids were outside and we drew quite a crowd. When I eventually reached the top, there was cheering and I felt like a king. But right after that came a loud, horrifying shout. The janitor who noticed me climbing up stood there and was shouting that I should get down immediately. Me, a not so clever 11-year-old boy full of adrenaline from the climb, did what he said. I immediately went down. This time not via the drain pipe, but by jumping off the roof. I fell down 10 meters, breaking both my ankles. First of all, I felt nothing, stood up, tried to walk it off like a cool kid, only to fall to the ground several moments later, crying my eyes out. I had to spend about 6 weeks in a wheelchair, had to spend 2 more years at that school being known as the boy who jumped off the roof, and a janitor who was traumatized because I listened to him. I learned my lesson and haven't climbed any buildings since then. Whew, I bet that janitor feels awful. I mean, it's a good thing you ended up okay, or else, man, that could have been really scarring for him. You can't make your own drinks. Okay. I work in a cafe inside of a bookstore. It's pretty chill most of the time, and management is usually pretty lax. Our company was bought by someone else recently, and corporate has been pushing all kind of nitpicky changes to, quote, improve, end quote, the store. One of the big crackdowns is employees making their own drinks and then paying for them, or even paying first and then making their own drink. When you work at a coffee shop, the employee drinks can tend to be pretty customized. They know what they want and often feel embarrassed at having another coworker make it. It gets more annoying when there's a rush in the cafe and you're on your break and have to first wait in line and then wait for the server to actually make the drink. It eats up extra break time. They said the new drink rule is for loss protection, but we get a 40% discount and none of us are really concerned with stealing when we get it for so cheap anyway. On to the malicious compliance. I would usually get the biggest size refresher they have. Refreshers are 50% refresher concentrate and 50% water with some ice and berries mixed in. So instead of ordering the large size and making it myself, I ordered the small size. I order the small and I asked the barista to give me the cup just full of the concentrate and a giant cup of ice. I take it, put the water in the cup of ice, and then add the concentrate, all while sitting in the break room in front of management. They can't say a thing about it. So instead of paying the employee rate for a giant drink, I have gamed the system and paid for a small while getting maximum drink. I'd feel guilty about it, but a lot of our regulars do the same thing. Huh, that's genius. Good on you, OP. You want a supervisor? Okay. This happened a few years ago to my cubicle mate at a call center. So I used to work at an IT call center. There was this guy who would call in periodically and get upset if a female answered. One day he called in, got a girl, cussed her out, hung up, and called again. Then he just so happened to be sent to girl 2, who was sitting next to girl 1. I guess he really needed his computer worked on because he got upset and asked for the supervisor. She told him she would have to grab his info and the reason he wanted a supervisor before she could get one. Once he told her that he didn't want to talk to a girl, she put him on hold to grab the supervisor. This is where the malicious compliance kicks in. Since it was later at night, there weren't very many supervisors. The supervisor on our team was a guy. After hearing why the caller wanted to talk to him, he decided to go grab the only female supervisor on the floor that night. This guy was so ticked when he heard her voice, he spent about 5 minutes trying to get her to get him a male supervisor. She said she was the only one who could talk to him. After he realized she wasn't budging, he called her a few names and then hung up. I don't know if he called back that night, but we were laughing about it for at least a week. Hey, the caller can't get mad. They specifically asked for a supervisor, and that's what they got. It's their fault that they're sexist and assumed that the supervisor wouldn't be a female. I mean, they shouldn't have had a problem talking to a female anyways. Bit of a short one, but it was jam-packed full of good stuff, right? Anyways, that's all we got, so thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have an amazing day. Goodbye.